where do you feel like you still have room to grow, and what area do you feel like right now is your strong suit?
I feel like I can grow in everything, to be honest, but I guess just my quickness, since I'm a taller guy, lengthier, but for my height, I have the advantage of strength and power over most guys while also being agile. So I think that's one of my strengths.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with Ryan Wallace from GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. We should have a strong pre-holiday show for you, including an interview with our number one player in the state, Manhattan High School's JJ Dunnigan, who recently announced he'll make his college commitment on January 2nd at the Under Armour Next All-America game. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All of those things help us to grow the show and help us get in front of more people like you. Ryan, I feel like I have to do a general wellness check on you with college football now deep into transfer portal madness. So how are you feeling? Are you all right? Can I get you a beverage?
I'm good. I just hate it. I mean, it's not what we signed up for, kind of the old guard, like you and me back in the day, right? Of just kind of being able to call guys. Now you've got to go. You're lucky to get a response from a kid. You're trying to find out who his representative is. Are the representatives going to tell you, what they want you to know, or, what they think you need to hear? There's just so many moving pieces. Guys are visiting, guys are committing, but then flipping that commitment. Like it's too much sometimes. And, I don't want to get deep down a rabbit hole, but like, I know there are the folks out there that are like, this is what coaches get paid the big bucks for. No, this is what's driving coaches like out of the business. It's what's driving, people that are in our shoes out of the business. Like, it's too much in such a condensed time frame, and it just drives everybody batty. It's just pure chaos. They've got to change it, but we're surviving, Kevin. We move on to the next day.
Longtime KU coach Don Fambro used to tell a story about, I think it was milking the cows at John Riggins' family farm to try and get him to attend Lawrence. We've come quite a way, obviously, since that point. We'll go deeper into the transfer portal. I feel like once the dust really settles and we know what everybody's class looks like. But for right now, literally as of this minute, because it's probably going to change by the end of the show, to say nothing of before the show actually comes out, here's where things stand. Kansas already has 12 transfers. Of course, we talked with Kansas GM Rob Ianello on our last episode about Kansas's transfer approach, and the Jayhawks transfer class ranks 14th nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. Missouri has 5 transfers, but a higher average ranking, and thus ranks just one spot below Kansas nationally at number 15. And Kansas State has 1 transfer so far, tying the Wildcats at number 64 in their transfer class. A lot more action yet to come for all 3 of those schools. But Ryan, what kind of stood out to you about this initial flurry here since the portal is open?
Well, I mean, to me, it just goes to show overall, when you're looking at kind of the teams that are having success and maybe the teams that aren't, is just how quickly you can pivot. It's how quickly, I think, how prepared were you going in? How organized are you? What kind of things are you doing kind of ahead of time, as best you can, as quote, like legally, I guess, as you can, right? But behind the scenes, like, how much are you doing to basically put yourself in the best position to know who you can go after, know who you can possibly get. And then if you don't get those pieces, like, how quickly can you transition? How quickly can you pivot? How quickly can you figure out, like, well, we didn't expect this guy to get in. We were going to target this guy, but there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think it's really about how much legwork you can do, not only beforehand, but then how much of that legwork can you then make up for if maybe things go astray, right? if the NIL isn't hitting the way, you thought the NIL would work and that sort of thing. And I guess, Kevin, as I throw it back to you, that's probably the other thing is how often the NIL thing gets thrown around as the reason you get a guy or the reason you don't get a guy. I think that by and large, that is a major factor when it comes to the transfer portal. But I also think it's become the most convenient excuse out there, again, when it comes to winning versus losing. I don't think it's always as simple as this team paid more than that team.
Well, both of us hear that in high school recruiting circles as well. You don't get a guy, coach says, oh, so-and-so outbid us. It's not always about that. And in some cases, that's false. In some cases, you didn't get outbid. You just lost a recruit. And I do think your point about being flexible in the portal is so well made, because I think when that sort of flurry of first names comes out and it's like, oh my gosh, here are the 3 guys that Kansas State has offered at wide receiver on day one, you're probably not getting those 3 guys. Like, if you're lucky, you may get one of those 3 guys. And how quickly can you move to the next guy? And quite frankly, Ryan, one of the challenges I think is not just being able to scour FBS, but having plan Bs at the FCS, at the Division II. I think I saw Iowa's maybe entertaining a guy from Division III here soon. And so being able to scout and have feelers out for guys at lower levels, because everybody wants the guy who is a proven player at the Power 4 level. The truth is that without a lot of NIL, without some of the things that go with that, that's just not super realistic. Instead, you're either swinging on a Power 4 guy who didn't really get an opportunity, and so the tape isn't really there, but maybe you like his talent, or you're going the other way and you're getting a guy who's really highly productive, albeit at a lower level, and you're projecting him to be able to bring that up.
Exactly. And, I know, again, there's probably more to touch on with Kansas. And so I'll leave that to you, because we do have player highlights from Kansas and Kansas State's classes so far. I guess I'll start with the K-State side. There's only one guy to pick from, and it's Jaden Rowe. And, he's a transfer from Oklahoma. He's got all the intangibles that you want, but you're not going to find any collegiate tape of him because he hasn't really played much. So here we go. Throw on the tape from Tulsa Union, and you see him out here at cornerback. But these next 2 clips is really what K-State is hoping that they're getting. Watch this here. He was the corner on the near side. I've never seen a kid track down this fast at his type of 6'3". He's listed at 220 now, but I think even in high school he was 210, 215. You see him get around the corner. You see the body control for a guy his size. He's not, shying away from physicality. That right there, those clips are kind of what K-State is banking on when it comes to Jaden Rowe. But this is an interesting take for me, Kevin, because, and again, K-State's not done as we're recording this. But, I think they see him in the Julius Brents mold. And it's a guy that potentially has multi-years of eligibility, depending on whether he gets waivers or not. Could be 2, could be 3. But, it is interesting because he hasn't played a ton of just straight up cornerback. We saw a little bit of it there in high school. We've seen a little bit of it at Oklahoma. They kind of went back and forth with him at safety and corner. But, there's a history of some concussions there with Jaden Rowe, right when he got to Oklahoma his true freshman year. His sophomore year, or redshirt freshman year, I guess, then he had this season-ending injury at Oklahoma where he played, I think it was against Arkansas State, and then went down. I want to say it was a shoulder. And then came back this year and just didn't really play a whole lot and was kind of beaten out by other guys. And there have been some defensive changes there at Oklahoma since he's been there, but he still hasn't been able to crack that kind of depth chart for a guy that, again, has all of these intangibles. And so, again, I see what K-State's going for because, again, in the world of the transfer portal and the NIL, you get a guy that's probably pretty low value because he doesn't have a whole lot of college tape to flaunt. But he still has, the 6'2", 6'3" size, 220 pounds, 4'3", 40, all the agility and the fluidness that you can ask for at a value. And so you got to take those guys when they come. But at the same time, if you're looking for a guy to immediately replace Jacob Parrish and Keenan Garber, this is an interesting take, right? You're banking a lot on the upside. And they probably still need a lockdown corner. Kevin, they probably still need an offensive tackle, a wide receiver. a defensive tackle. They're looking at linebacker. And the problem with K-State that they find themselves in here, Kevin, is those are all premium positions in the portal.
Yep.
Like, there are a lot of wide receivers. You can probably go and find one even if it's late. Corners, there's probably going to be enough corners. You might not get the guy, a true lockdown, but there's probably going to be enough corners there that you can try and make up for it. But like offensive tackle, defensive tackle, premium positions, they're not a dime a dozen. There's going to be a drop-off at some point in the pool. And when you're at K-State, and as we record this on Wednesday night, and you're looking at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you got to get your butts on a plane to Arizona and go to the Rate Bowl, you've got like 3 days, 72 hours, maybe a little plus, to pretty much get some of those big-time pieces in place. Otherwise, you're hoping the pool is still deep enough once the Rate Bowl is over when you get back on December 27th. So that's kind of where K-State finds themselves. I like Rowe, big time upside, but probably more project than you would think when you see his size and a guy that's coming from Oklahoma. KU, on the other hand, as I throw it back to you, much different start with kind of a good mix of potential and probably ready to go immediate impacts.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And to your point on the potential thing, I mean, you look from the Kansas side at a guy like Austin Booker, didn't play really at Minnesota. Yep. I remember you and I passing his practice tape around because he didn't have game tape, winds up coming in and being an immediate NFL level guy and going in the NFL draft that following season. That's kind of the best case scenario for those kinds of guys. And that's why you swing on those guys, because you are going to have that pan out as a best case scenario. To your point, though, Kansas does have a few of those guys. I think the interesting guy in this class, though, as we're looking forward, is Tyler Mercer, coming from North Texas. When you look at what Kansas has set up in that interior offensive line pipeline, you bring back Bryce Foster, you wind up bringing back Kobe Baines as well. There's a spot for him potentially at one of those guard spots, but where I really like him is down the line, Ryan. I think that he's a guy that with his several years there, and we talked about reaching for guys that are maybe a level below and then going after guys and projecting them up. He could be a multi-year starter at center for Kansas after Bryce Foster. You're swinging on a freshman All-American, so somebody who already has a little bit of a resume. He's got time there to go ahead and develop it. And I do think that when you watch these highlights, his ability to anchor against bull rushes for a guy as young as he is really impressive. I think you see the athleticism, you see the work with his hands. I also think he's got some coming off the ball. He's a good athlete in space. He's definitely not afraid of contact. And so when you look at what Mercer brings this offensive line, Ryan, I think he brings you something where you can get something right now. It wouldn't shock me if he winds up winning that open guard spot. But I think really looking at him as potentially the Bryce Foster replacement here after this season, he has a lot of value there as a guy who already has a pretty strong resume.
Yeah, I mean, all those clips that we plucked were from against a team like Tulane. And, K-State fans know about Tulane's defensive front, one of the best teams in the AAC. I mean, they were scratching and clawing to get into potentially kind of the Boise State spot that the Broncos ended up taking, as that kind of group of five in the college football playoff. So to see him do that, and to see, again, from the K-State side of me, we watched Shane Porter enter the portal and go to North Texas this past season and end up at running back and just kind of went off for North Texas. And you go back and watch some of Shane Porter's highlights, and it's not getting around the corner, right? It's up the gut, A gap, B gap, and you know who the lead blocker is there. But I like what KU has done so far. I think, like you said, Kevin, they've got a great mix and match of some guys that could be plug and play right away that are no doubters, some guys that are maybe some projectables, some guys that, again, like you said, Kevin, maybe Mercer is a guy that can step in day one. And if he's not, that's okay, because you've got some flexibility with his eligibility there. This is beyond, sorry to Missouri fans that are listening. They're like, man, where's the SEC talk here? The Big 12 guys here, we got our blinders on, but Texas Tech, KU, who else is putting together? There was somebody else, and now I'm blanking, that have had some really, really
like
strong.
Baylor's done in the portal. Yeah.
Baylor has done a nice job. I've seen Oklahoma State. Maybe they're not landing everybody, but they're getting some big time names on campus again. And we'll see if some of those commitments materialize. But it's funny because, for all the talk about the Big 12 not getting it done in the high school recruiting, you look at what they're doing in the portal right now, and the Big 12 is fighting tooth and nail with some of the heaviest hitters out there. Texas Tech, KU, Baylor. This goes on.
Houston's got a top 10 class, and this would shock you, but Colorado also doing well.
Yes, of course. Of course. So, yeah, look out. Big 12 doing damage. K-State's got to pick it up. And then with Missouri, we don't have highlights, but, and again, forgive me, I'm blanking on the name. I've been talking about him, it feels like all week. And KU had him on campus for a visit. Absolutely love the get that they got out of Northwest Missouri State.
Yes.
The defensive end, I mean, to me, he fits exactly what you want. Yeah, Langdon Kitchen. Thank you to producer Nick. Great. I mean, the frame is all there. A guy that wants to be at Missouri, he's going to give it his all in Columbia. I love that get. And again, kind of filling in for a guy that we'll touch on here in a little bit at that defensive end position. Different in terms of eligibility, right? But maybe kind of getting what Missouri fans were hoping they might get out of a former 5-star either last year or this coming season. I think they're going to get what they were hoping for when you get Langdon Kitchen on the field.
Absolutely. And, sticking with Missouri and on an outgoing transfer note, local transfer note, Williams Nwaneri, former 5-star prospect out of Lee Summit North, decided to transfer out of Missouri after one season and head northwest to Nebraska. Of course, Nwaneri's high school coach at Lee Summit North, Jamar Mosey, now at Nebraska. Not necessarily a surprise, but real quick, Ryan, what did you think of that move?
Not surprising. And, I tweeted this out, but, for those that maybe have forgotten, like Kevin said, Lee Summit North High School was at one point, I think, the number one player overall in the country. He ended up finishing his class as the number 6 24/7 composite, number 6 overall player, number 2 defensive lineman, number 1 player in the state of Missouri. I tweeted this out, Kevin, or X'd. What do you say now? X'd, tweeted, posted, shared about Williams. I don't think the recruiting services us did him any favors. When I first saw him as a sophomore and talking to folks at Lee Summit North, I mean, immediately it was like, who the hell is that guy? We knew Caden Green, and we show up and I'm like, who is this kid? And he was like coming off this was like 2 or 3 games into his sophomore year. And they were like, this kid's the future. He is going to be the next like Myles Garrett. And you saw it from him as a sophomore when he was really like trying to make a name for himself. But the more, and I went and watched him as a junior, watched him as a senior, the flashes got kind of less and less. The motor was always something that you were like, like you would see it like when Lee Summit North needed a play, there's Williams Nwaneri. But when they kind of didn't need a play, when it's 1st and 10, when it's 2nd and 11, he was just kind of going through motions. And that was always something that for me was like, not great, but you hope that he could turn it on. But in the sense, it was like, then the accolades came, right? And you were like, man, I just wondered if maybe things got a little bit too fast and got ahead of Williams Nwaneri, Kevin. And to the point where by the time he got on campus at Columbia, it wasn't just for him, but, Missouri State Legislature is coming out right around that time conveniently where you can now pay guys that stay in state with Missouri and sign right away. And now they're starting to get their NIL stuff like while they're still in high school. Like it just all kind of unraveled to the point where you and I were talking and it was like, I think Williams Nwaneri can make it. Like there's no doubt about it that the stuff that you see that made him a 5-star prospect is still there. But we as a recruiting service did him no favors in having him as highly ranked as he was and making that expectation immediate to where I think people like us that had seen him knew it wasn't going to be a terrific right out of the bat true freshman season that everybody was kind of anticipating from him.
Look, it's tough to play early in the SEC. It's really tough to play early in the SEC on the defensive line. And I think that it was going to be tough for him to make that transition anyway. Like you said, those of us who saw him saw that there was a rawness there, a need to continue to be coached up and developed. And so it did not surprise me at all to see the season that he had at Missouri. At Nebraska, I'm interested to see how he does there. I think that, like, to your point, I do think there's a lot of ability there. I also think the weight with him is kind of interesting, because does he wind up getting a little bit bigger? Because there were some times where he was 270, 275-ish. It felt like, got to Missouri and was around 255. I think had lost some weight in an effort to kind of be more twitchy. With him going to Nebraska, different strength staff, all of those different things. Is this a guy that you try and push up like a Trayvon Walker, like you saw at Georgia? Mm-hmm. Is this a guy that you try and keep him, sort of as light or as agile as possible? I'm interested to see how Nebraska develops him as well.
And just to really quick wrap on this, I think you make a great point in terms of what I'm excited to watch Williams Nwaneri do in Nebraska. Is I think there's going to be a level of patience and comfort knowing that Jamar Mosey is there. I think he'll just feel like he's a little bit more taken care of. And that's not a shot at Missouri. I just think with his guys, with Isaiah Mosey and Jamar and other guys from Kansas City in the area, I feel like he'll feel it a little bit more, that there's more of a nurturing and we're going to be patient here. But also, what do they decide to do with him positionally? Because to me, the more I saw of him, even at the high school level, he could be Myles Garrett, which was kind of what everybody was always telling me he could be. But I always saw kind of a Chris Jones, Kevin, a guy that was more of your athletic guy, but with the bigger frame on the inside, that if you needed to move him outside in certain situations, you could, but he was more of an interior guy that could give guards and center spits. Be very curious to see what Matt Rule and them decide to do with him. Either way, do I expect it'll be immediate at Nebraska? No, but I definitely still think the potential is there.
Absolutely. We will have our interview with Elite 2026 defensive back JJ Dunnigan, who's making his college decision in 2 weeks, here in a minute. But first, we want to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. Winter sports season is arriving, which means hot gyms followed by cold weather outside. And Home Field has you covered for everything you'll face. T-shirts for indoors with the heat ramped up, and all those sweatshirts, jackets, and outerwear you need to toss over the top when the game's over. Kansas State, and Missouri fans all have more than 40 items apiece to choose from. So head to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast presented by Home Field Apparel. Ryan, we spent the last segment talking about the transfer portal. Let's take a look here at some high school players who stood out. Sticking locally, it's awards season after what was a terrific high school season on both sides of the state line. And the latest winner of the Simone Award, which goes to the best player in the Kansas City Metro, is Liberty running back Jackson Hicks. He rushed for 2,717 yards, scored 31 total touchdowns, becoming the first running back to win since 2019 and the first Liberty player ever to win the award. Hicks won the award over a strong field of finalists, including Blue Valley West's Tate Nagy, Lee Summit North's Isaiah Mosey, Lawrence's Banks Bowen, and the lone junior to make it into the finalists, Rocco Marriott of Platte County. Nagy, of course, headed to Kansas. Mosey signed with Nebraska. Bowen inked with Tulsa. We've talked about Rocco Marriott quite a bit on the show. Ryan, is somebody who's involved in the Simone process and the other awards that are linked into that, like the Otis Taylor Award, which goes to the top wide receiver in the city. Can you, kind of shed a little bit of light on the selection process and what that was like?
Yeah, so I think this was my 5th or 6th year as part of the Simone Awards Committee, media panel. And so, as was the case this year, there was some transition in terms of who was coordinating it all at the top. I mean, obviously you have the Simone family, but there was a kind of change in the direction in terms of who was leading the charge, so to speak. But the panel has always existed, and they try and do as best job as they can to coordinate both the Missouri kids and the Kansas kids. But essentially, the media kind of takes kind of a larger approach, right, of looking at all the guys throughout the season. And around October, you start kind of compiling Google spreadsheets, just like you and I do for recruiting and stuff, of guys that might be candidates for this award or could be candidates for this award. And then usually it usually starts late October, early November, where the coaches become involved. They start kind of voting, and the media also gets a vote, but also we're very much outnumbered by coaches, which I'll get to in a minute. And so then that whittles it down to kind of what you see as your semifinalists. We kind of vote again on just the semifinalists. That becomes like your top four and your finalists. And then, of course, you vote again. And usually the voting is done kind of ahead of the Kansas State finals, I believe. So 2 weeks ahead, usually, I think, of Missouri, if my mind is right on the calendar. And so let me just start by saying that I don't want to take anything away from any of the guys that won this year. This isn't about it. Jackson Hicks is a terrific player. When you're the Suburban Red, offensive player of the year, when you're a big part of leading Liberty as far into the state bracket as that program has been in many, many years.
State semis, right?
Yeah, state semifinals.
Against DeSmet, right?
DeSmet. And he was, the ground game was the Liberty offense. So, you can probably account a lot of that to a terrific offensive line that we saw, but take nothing away from Jackson Hicks. He's a terrific player who I'm happy somebody won that wasn't a quarterback or a receiver. You know what I mean? Like, it was nice to see a running back get his, right? And I think Jackson Hicks, from a recruiting standpoint, probably should be getting a little bit higher looks than he is now. I think it's kind of D3 range, right? I mean, he probably is a better player than that. And so good for Jackson Hicks to win the Simone. But here's my problem with the Simone Awards and how things are handled right now. I think right now we're probably giving a little bit too much power to the coaches, and the coaches might get upset with. I'm not trying to take the coaches out of the voting process. It can't just be media, because then you'll have coaches that'll think that we're crooked and that we're going a certain way. You have to have kind of a meeting of the minds, so to speak. But I'm more for, maybe having a smaller pool of coaches. Coaches decide on kind of a committee of coaches that can then meet with the committee of media guys, where there's kind of some equal representation between Missouri and Kansas. Because here's the problem, Kevin, is I think a lot of times with the coaches, and this is where I'm going to flip it back around. So the coaches that are kind of have steam coming out of their ears right now, bear with me. You might understand my point here is coaches are so busy, Kevin.
Yeah.
And so when you're a head coach, you watch the film of the guys that are in your league probably a lot, and you see them at 7-on-7 and all that sort of thing. But outside of that, high schools have maybe 1, maybe 2 games a year, unless you're like a Rockhurst or a Miege or Washburn Rural, that, you're playing multiple teams from outside your league, like non-conference teams, so to speak. Otherwise, the 6 or 7 guys that are in your league. And when it comes to postseason time and you're voting on guys, if I'm at Smithville, how do I know anything about Tate Nagy outside of his numbers? You've never seen Tate Nagy in any sort of like realm. And so I think it's easy to just go with the big name, which, again, here's the other part of it is I cover recruiting. When I come to the table for postseason, it pisses me off when I see guys that are kind of throwing the recruiting accolades and offers around, to try and wave a kid's flag as a guy that should win an award. It should always, always, always be about what you are right now. It should always be what you do your junior season or your senior season, or maybe if you have some outstanding sophomore that just cannot be denied. That's what it should be about. It's not projecting where you're going to be in college. It's how good of a high school player were you this season. But again, getting back to the coaches, I just think it's hard on them to vote for guys that they haven't really seen. And then beyond that, you're voting, I think, for guys too, where, it's just, if you're a Missouri coach, you haven't seen the Kansas guys. If you're a Kansas coach, you haven't really seen the Missouri guys. It makes for a very challenging voting process. And here's the other thing too, is maybe we delay the votes a little bit. It's kind of like the Heisman. Like if you're voting for the Heisman 2 and 3 weeks in advance, that's a problem. And as we saw this year, I'm not saying any of the finalists weren't deserving, Kevin, but I wonder how many of those votes might have shifted given the performance we saw from a guy like Braven Powell in the playoffs, particularly in the Manhattan game. You know, that's a guy that you're like, man, maybe he should have gotten a little bit more recognition beyond just a team. Maybe some individual honors could have come his way had we delayed the voting process a little bit more. So again, that's my vent on it. I love what the Simones mean. Like, I love what that family has built. You and me, Kevin, like it's a big deal, the Simone Awards. Like you grew up like who was going to win? I mean, who's going to get that assembly and all that stuff? And maybe there's some things that could change in terms of that process and what I've already laid out. But yeah, I think maybe taking some of the power away from the coaches, making more of a committee of coaches, delaying the process, having more of a meeting of the minds, just like they do with the playoff committees and stuff like that. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have people that are pissed off that some guy won or some guy was nominated and this guy wasn't. You're never going to be able to please everybody, but I'd love to have maybe a little bit more of a collection where the universal groups like, I think we got this right. And I feel like lately there's been more and more instances where I leave the process going, I'm not sure we got this right. And so that's kind of my long-winded spiel as we're pulling back the curtain a lot here on this show, Kevin, as we kind of pull back the curtain on postseason awards. And I'll also give a quick pitch here because I am part of it and I am proud about the Preps KC McCarthy elite team. I feel like that is you're narrowing down positions that when we say it's an elite selective team, like that is the elite of the elite. There is coach involvement. There is media involvement. We try and have it fairly balanced as best we can while also giving it to the best players at their positions. Some of those positions, Kevin, as you can imagine, were like, we'd love to have like 8 guys, and other positions, it was pretty quick. Like you've got 1 or 2. But I've had a lot of fun putting that together. I'm excited to see where the Simones go from here on out. And hopefully we can make the processes all around just a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more collectively good.
Also, Larry Porter should have gotten the Otis Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm not going to get it.
Go and see great season, obviously by Isaiah Mosey. We talked about him earlier. Terrific season by Larry Porter. I think everybody who played against Larry Porter knew that dude was getting the ball and that you had to stop him from getting the ball, and that even if you had to send all 11 guys to his side to stop him, that was what you had to do to slow that team down. And he produced at just an incredible level. Honestly, I thought he probably should have been a candidate or a finalist for the Simone Award itself with the year that he had. So really,
I got to throw one more thing in now, because now you're kind of like, oh, that was something that I didn't touch on. In addition to, and this is an argument kind of against Larry Porter, even though, again, I think you and I are both on the same page with that. But let's just take Larry as an example. I think a lot of times too, if you don't know a player, if you haven't, you don't have time to get on Huddle, which I would recommend anybody that's voting get on Huddle if there's anybody that you're unfamiliar with. But to me, it also, just like it can't be about your recruiting offers or how big of a name you are, it also shouldn't be based solely on statistics.
I agree.
Because Ivan, you and I know there are guys out there that are putting up absurd statistics, but maybe it's just because they're just chucking a ball deep, or maybe it's the level of competition you're playing, there has to be a little bit more involved. And I do think, again, because there are some guys that I haven't seen, or there's guys that coaches haven't seen, you do kind of look at the stats and just go, well, who had the biggest numbers? We'll put those guys there. And it can't be about that. It's got to be more involved and in depth than that.
Yeah, it needs to be a holistic process, and it needs to involve all of those different things. And so I do think that any awards process pretty much has some things that could be cleaned up or made better. It's the same for All-State, for Kansas in football. I think there are holes there as well. I think, this comes from a place of love, Ryan. Like it's something,
it really does.
It's something that you love. It's something that that I've loved, being a really, really bad high school football player in the city. You pay attention to who gets the Simone Award. And so it's not coming from, it's coming from a place where you want that award to be as good and that process to be as good and as whole as possible. So I 100% get that. Speaking, Ryan, of Simone Awards, Kansas announced the promotion of Brandon Shelby to defensive backs coach. Shelby, of course, was a Simone Award winner in his own right at Rockhurst before moving on to excel at Oklahoma. By this point, he's got a pretty extended coaching career. Ryan, I know you really like this hire as well, with the hire with Leon Douglas and Kansas, making more of an effort to kind of tap into Kansas City contact.
What a segue there. The throwback photo of Brandon Shelby at Rockhurst holding up the Simone Award. First off, yeah, for folks that don't know, I mean, Brandon Shelby was a dude now. Yeah. I mean, at Rockhurst, you can speak to this more, Kevin, but I mean, it's like there that year that Shelby won it, like it was like, there was Sproles there too. And Shelby was the guy. He goes to Oklahoma as a player for Bob Stoots, plays in 2 BCS national championship games and, bowl games, I think, every year. But I love the way too that he's worked his way up the tree. As a Seattle Seahawks fan, like I know the name Deshaun Shedd, and, this is a guy that Shelby mentored at Portland State. And he's mentored guys all the way through. And, I think it's easy for folks to be like, well, Indiana hasn't had any success until this year. But like, there have been guys in that program on his side of the ball at his position that have been really good players and that have also been highly coveted recruits that he's gone and won in states like Florida at a place like Indiana. And so I don't think Indiana has really asked him to recruit Kansas City that much. But make no mistake about it, like the name Brandon Shelby still rings loudly in the Metro. And so, like you said, Kevin, when you combine a Brandon Shelby and the connections that Leon Douglas have, it really starts to strengthen that vice grip that KU would like to have in Kansas City around the Metro, specifically on the Missouri side. And so I was touting, this was a hire that I think I wanted Bill Snyder to make at one point. I had it on Wabash Station years ago with Bill Snyder. I've had it on when Chris Kleiman was putting his staff together before Van Malone was hired. Brandon Shelby was a name that I was constantly throwing out just because I think, A, he's earned it as a position coach and as a recruiter, and he's a local guy that, I think has longed for an opportunity to get home, and KU finally delivers it.
Yeah, he was a guy that a lot of water cooler conversation about who is better between he and Darren Sproles. They were contemporaries of each other. They were both great. Little quick piece of trivia, Ryan. Brandon Shelby actually set the Oklahoma record for most sacks in a season by a defensive back.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of a stat there. He was a very good blitzer. I think he had 4 sacks in the season. So shout out to him for that. And like you said, he's got that coaching resume and the contacts as well.
Well, and again, we'll wrap it up kind of by going back to the beginning of the segment and tying in the first segment when you talk about Lee Summit North. You've now got Leon Douglas. You've got Brandon Shelby. You've got their connections. Now you've got Jamar Mosey up at Nebraska. Missouri likes to come and try and get their hand involved, just like K-State likes to get their hand involved. Kansas City, it's there for a while it was like it was Nate Shieldhouse's to rule, right? Or it was Andy Hill back, when in the Pinkel era. And then Shieldhouse left, and it's kind of been up for grabs, it feels like. It's going to be really up for grabs these next couple cycles, and it's going to be really interesting to see which of these programs and their kind of like Kansas City connection ends up kind of reigning supreme. I'm very excited to watch this all, unfold.
The battle for Ronell Johnson and co. just heating up for 2026. Coming up, our interview with another 2026 talent in Manhattan High's JJ Dunnigan, set to announce his decision on January 2nd. He'll talk about his finalists, how he plans to announce, and more after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. We're joined by, in my opinion, the number one player in the state of Kansas for 2026 in Manhattan High School's JJ Dunnigan. I had that written as our number one player in the state, JJ. I kind of left and out on an island there. JJ, thanks for joining us.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
JJ, the season just finished up. You went to the state title game. The awards have started coming in. It feels like everybody's picking you as state defensive player of the year. Have you had a chance to unpack the year that you just had, and what kind of stands out to you?
Just looking back, I feel like I was a very versatile player, like not only on defense, but on offense and special teams as well. I just felt like they used me pretty well all over the field. And I think it's fair that I won the defensive player of the year for sure.
JJ, when you think about, again, maybe it's recruiting related, when do you feel like your kind of coming out party was? Did you feel like it was closer into the fall once you got the uniform on and got to, lay the wood a little bit on defense, or was it more back in combine season that you feel the ball really started to roll?
Definitely back in combine season, where I went to camps and just showcased my ability in front of the coaches in colleges. They seen how tall I was and my length and my athleticism. So they really knew I had some upside to me. So I think that's when it got the ball rolling.
Kevin, that's when, so peeling back the curtain here a minute, Kevin Flaherty was actually the one that was like, hey, have you seen this film of JJ Dunnigan? And so I threw the film on. This is like last winter. And I'm like, yeah, we need to see this kid. And then it was at the 6-star camp, JJ, that I was like, hey, Kevin, you remember the JJ Dunnigan guy? Yeah, you're going to want to see JJ Dunnigan in person. And you're right. That's when it all just unraveled from there.
Definitely.
Yeah, Ryan saw you as well, I think, at K-State camp. I was there at KU camp when you were there. And so had a chance to see you in pads a couple times this season. Both of us were at the Derby game. Can you break down that game a little bit? Because you had a lot of responsibilities that game, not just – on defense, where you kind of had to tag Desan Brame and follow him around, which Desan Brame had one of the best senior seasons of anybody in the state, but also offensively and all the different things that you had to do across the field.
Yeah, I knew it was a lot of responsibility coming in. Deshaun's a great player, so following him around the whole game was going to be a hard thing to do. But I got it done offensively as well. They targeted me a couple times. I caught that fade. They said I was out, but I think I was in there. Just overall a great game, and it was a really hard-fought game as well.
You decided to announce your decision at the Under Armour Next game on January 2nd. Where are you at kind of with your decision at this point? I mean, do you know who it is? Is it the sort of thing where that's sort of a deadline and you're going to use the next week or two to make your decision? Where are you at?
I'm still deciding right now between a couple colleges.
What was it that made you say, I want to go ahead and get this done? Because again, as we sit here today, 24/7 Composite has you as the 537th best player in the country. I think that's grossly underrated. But I mean, I say that to lead in of like, I think your recruitment was on pace to really pick up. And yet you're like, no, I'd rather shut it down early. Why is that?
I think just with all the craziness with the transfer portal and limiting spots and things like that, that I would want to secure my spot somewhere and just continue to build my relationship with the coaches and just be as mature as possible with the situation. So
you said that you have a few schools you're deciding between. Can you peel back the curtain a little bit and maybe let us know, who are you looking at and what stands out about those schools?
Yeah, at this time, I'm down to 4 schools, which is Nebraska, KU, K-State, and Stanford. All those things all those schools have something in common. I have great relationships with the coaches, and they have a great culture and things like that. So that's why they're in my top 4 right now.
Obviously, K-State, with your dad playing there, with you really growing up kind of in their backyard, is one that everybody's focused on. I'm curious, what's kind of your first memory of K-State athletics?
Man, it's probably not even football. It's probably a basketball game where I was sitting front row with my brothers and just watching the basketball team. That was probably my first memory I can think of.
Do you remember like any guys that were on that K-State team?
Beasley, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yep.
That's a good time to check them out. You spent a few days here recently at Kansas. How'd that visit go? Somebody held up a sign that said, "We want JJ." You know, how surreal is that to head on a visit that's not even, you know, necessarily a super publicized visit and getting that kind of interest.
It just felt great to see that sign, man. When I seen that, my face lit up. It was awesome to see. But, you know, they welcomed me with open arms. You know, I had great talks with all the coaches, even the offensive coaches too. So it was great.
Another visit that you took here recently was being able to watch bowl practice for K-State. Anything unique about that visit and practice and any players kind of jump out from that afternoon that you were there?
The players, definitely Avery Johnson, man. His arm is live. He could throw it. I could definitely see him improving. But just further my relationship with Coach Malone, Coach Kleiman, Coach Klanderman, and things like that.
With Nebraska, I believe you made a game day visit this year. Who'd you watch Nebraska against, and what was that atmosphere like being up there?
I went a couple times. I've seen the Colorado game, and man, the atmosphere was just crazy. You know, the crowd gets insanely loud. You can't hear anything out there. I think Travis even said that was one of the toughest games just because of the noise. But yeah, that was a great experience too.
JJ, when you announced like I'm gonna make my commitment a little early, has quote business picked up for you from these four schools? Like, do you feel like they're really like, you know, amping up their text messages, their phone calls, and all those sorts of things, knowing that, you know, time is limited? Or for the most part, were they already kind of on you that hard, and so it's kind of been just business as usual?
Most of the schools were kind of already on me pretty hard, but from the commitment date, they really picked it up to just trying to build a relationship with me as much as possible to try and secure me.
You talked a little bit about Coach Malone. I'm curious, who are the coaches recruiting you for Kansas, Nebraska, and Stanford? You said you had great relationships with all of those staffs.
Yep. With Nebraska, it would be Coach Butler. Yep. With KU, it's Coach DK McDonald and Coach Shelby. He just got moved, and mostly with the recruiter from Stanford right now.
Okay. With you know, another hot topic, you know, on social media, on message boards, is obviously your dad playing at Kansas State and what kind of role he might have in the recruitment. With your family, I would imagine you want to involve them, but is it a family decision or is it your decision?
It's 100% my decision. You know, just because he played at K-State, he doesn't like force it on me to, you know, check them out more or like commit there or anything like that. It's 100% my decision.
Where are people recruiting you? Because is it at one spot in the secondary? Is it multiple spots? Or some people saying corner, some people saying safety? Like it seems like you can play just about any spot in the secondary. And so I guess a second part of that question after that is, where do you see yourself? Like where do you see your best fit in the secondary being?
I think, yeah, I can play every spot, you know, and they've been talking to me about, you know, here you play corner, here you play boundary corner, here you play strong safety, free safety. And I feel like that's a good option for me just because of my versatility.
JJ, how important is it for you to, you know, kind of be a torchbearer for just the state of Kansas in general? And how, you know, are there other guys that you want to bring with you, even if that is to Stanford or Nebraska, you know, local guys that you have kind of grown close with and have a bond towards?
Yeah, I think it's real smart for me to go ahead and, you know, wherever school I pick, I'll be able to recruit guys from the Kansas area like Tyron Parker and other big playmakers from around the area.
I'm kind of curious. You went to Nebraska for the Colorado game. You had a chance to see Travis Hunter in person. You play both sides of the ball in high school and do it at a really high level. Is there any part of you that's kind of nudging the defensive backs coaches a little bit and saying, you know, you need somebody to go out there and run a post route? I can go run a post route for you.
100%. Yeah, I can do all that. And I look up to Travis a lot. So just seeing him do that really inspired me. But for sure, I definitely think I could play both ways.
So one other thing that I'm curious about, and maybe you haven't thought this far yet, but just to give fans of all four of those schools kind of an idea of how it's going to all, you know, transpire, is you get down to the UA next game. Do you know, is this going to be something that you'll broadcast the commitment live? Will you kind of notify coaches in advance? Will you have an edit ready for like your brother to tweet out on your account? Like how do you think this is all going to actually occur?
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be broadcasted at the game, and then shortly after I'll post where I'm committed and things like that.
Do you think you'll let the coaches know, or you kind of want an element of surprise?
Nah, I don't think I'll let them know. I think it'll be a surprise to everybody. I think that'd be pretty cool.
There you go. Let them sweat it out.
Yeah.
When I talked to you after the Free State game, you said, hey, I feel like we can play with and beat anybody in the state. And you guys wound up having a really sort of tough road to get to that state title game. How do you feel like you guys backed that up as a team? You, Carter Aslan, Hoover, all the guys.
I think we definitely backed it up, man. It's a group of one of the toughest teams that Coach Sharks has ever had, he said. So that really just kind of shows our mentality and, what we go out there and do what we did every Friday night, I guess. Yeah.
I got some fun quick hitters for you here in a minute, but I wanted to finish from my end on this is where do you feel like, obviously Kevin and I speak very highly of you. We feel like you're pretty polished, but where do you feel like you still have room to grow, and what area do you feel like right now is your strong suit?
I feel like I can grow in everything, to be honest, but I guess just my quickness, since I'm a taller guy, lengthier, but for my height, I have the advantage of strength and power over most guys while also being agile. So I think that's one of my strengths.
Well, one last question for me before Ryan kind of gets into the quick hitters. You said you felt like you were in on the fade against Derby. When I saw you against Free State, it feels like you had a catch where you were they called out too. And so my question is just, was I awful luck for you as lack of a review in these?
You might have been. I'm not sure.
So I guess, don't pick KU then, because then Kevin will be at those games. And no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's get into some quick hitters here that we always like to do. First, JJ, do you have any pregame rituals that you stick to?
I don't. I just pray before every game.
Okay. How about this? Let's go family and Manhattan High. And here's a guy that I know your dad actually helped get to where he is. But let's say one-on-one, high school Deontay Burton against high school JJ Dunnigan. Who's winning?
Oh, I'm winning that one.
How about let's say where you are right now going into senior year against, let's just say the K-State version of your dad.
I'm playing receiver. He's playing corner.
Let's say he's playing corner and you're receiver. Yes.
I think I'll beat him. I'm taller. I'm a little faster than he was. I think I'll beat him.
I like it. Who do you think right now is the toughest cover in the NFL if you're a corner? Who's the toughest guy to cover right now?
Jamar Chase, man. He's been killing it out there. So I'd say him.
Okay, you're about to head to Florida for the UA next game. What's the best vacation you've ever taken, or maybe a vacation spot that you'd like to visit at some point?
My favorite was probably Colorado or Florida. I've been to Florida as well. I went to Disney World and things like that. But those are probably my two favorite ones.
Okay, and finally, Christmas is around the corner. What's the one present, man, that you got to have this year?
One present, probably just some Jordans or something. I don't ask for too much.
Okay, well, what's Jordans are we talking?
Say Jordan 11s or some Jordan 4s.
Okay, 11s or 4s. I hope mom and dad are listening.
Hope Santa's listening. Yeah,
well, there you go.
For any younger
for the kids, yeah.
That we have. JJ, thanks again for swinging by, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. We want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year's spent with people who give you plenty of holiday cheer. Until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.